Good afternoon, folks. Look at these smiling faces joining us. We're a couple minutes away from launch, but thanks for logging in a little bit early. I don't know, Jamie. Dave looks like he's game ready, man. He is focused. He is focused.
I see it. Yes.
And you're as always, Andrew. How are you?
Good. Good to see you, man. Are you wearing blue light blockers?
No.
I was going to say you're really leveling it up today.
No.
We got us. How are you? Nice to see you.
Hello, everyone. Get settled. Shelly, it looks like you have lunch. Yep. Continue snacking away. We'll get started in about a minute. Thanks for joining us. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie.
Good to see you.
It's nice to be here.
It is the top of the hour, so thank you guys for being prompt. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's session will be recorded, and I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for sharing part of your day with us. I'm your co-host for today's session, which is Avoiding the Great Resignation, 5 Keys to Retain Your Rockstars. And I'm joined by Andrew Friedman, who is managing partner at Shift. And if I had to think about it, Andrew's greatest gift and passion is really designing organizational systems and processes that translate individual talent into really tangible business results. He truly, it's a pleasure to work alongside him day in and day out. And he really enjoys helping our client organizations thrive, which coincidentally is the title of his #1 Amazon bestseller. So I'll turn it over to Andrew. We're pleased to be here with you today, and he's going to give you a roadmap of the outcomes of our time together.
Right on. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it. And it's good to see you all here, those of you that have already logged on and those who will be logging on. This will be an interactive discussion as we go. And Jamie said some really nice things about me in the tee up, which I appreciate immensely. And it is a pleasure to not only lead this session for you, but to do it with Jamie. She and I do this stuff day in and day out. So what you're about to experience is not philosophy. It's not hyperbole. It's not pontification. This is tried and true, battle tested, what we practice and do every single day for our organization and for our client organization. So we're excited for the discussion that is ensuing. And let's talk a bit about what we hope to accomplish, what we will accomplish with you. The learning objectives for today's discussion are these. Number one, we want to help you understand the current state, pulse, and landscape of the workforce. There's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that you've read, a lot that you've seen, a lot that you've experienced. We want to distill it down to some key nuggets for you. That's the first objective we have. The second, in terms of learning, is we will help you know the critical elements related to attracting and retaining high-performing talent. What this is not a recruiting seminar. So we're not going to go through the tactics of how to recruit. We're going to teach you the fundamental building blocks of how to build a high-performance culture so you become a magnet for attracting and retaining your top talent. And then third, we're going to help you understand how to translate the elements. So we're going to give them to you, but you also need to learn how to translate those things into specific action so that you're able to elevate your team or your business unit or your organizational engagement and performance. So we do not have an attachment to what level of leader you are here. If you're a frontline leader, if you're a mid-level leader, you're a director, you're a VP, a managing partner, an owner, it doesn't matter. You're going to get value from the conversation today. So these are our objectives. We will accomplish these together. And let's start with a little bit of a look in the mirror. Jamie and I always find that this is a best practice. We love this quote. This is actually one that we used in the book Thrive. You can see what it says, and why we pick this one is right now we see a lot of leaders who are refusing to acknowledge the current state realities. Truly, they're not accepting it. They're not willing to accept it. They can't see it. Their perspective is different, and or they're just choosing a different version of the truth. And by sharing some of the current state realities, we hope to help you maybe hold up the mirror a little bit differently to yourself and to your organization, because your ability to accept the truth doesn't change what's true and what's really happening. And so we would love to help you expand, your mind, think differently about what the reality is, and also the realities of what can be for your organization. So let's start with the first opportunity to have you come off the bench and just go right to your chat. We've got the chat feature, I believe, enabled. David, yeah, I think we have that enabled. So the goal, yeah, we do. So the goal here is answer this question. Just type right into chat. For your business, whatever your role is, your organization, what we want you to type in here is, what are the biggest changes you have made to your organization, to your strategy over the last 12 months? And also think a little bit forward. What will you be changing in the next 12 months? So just type that into chat. We want to understand where you are as you're coming into this conversation. The biggest changes you've already made to your organizational strategy over the past 12 months, or the biggest changes you will be making in the next 12 months. Go right to the chat and let's just hear a little bit from you. Implementing a hybrid work environment. Dave, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Work contractors to service client accounts. Yep, we're seeing a lot of that. Flexible resourcing, managing teams in the hybrid, trusting employees more, Kelly. Yeah, everybody remote, revamping onboarding and performance management process. Hybrid, yeah, a lot around hybrid and working in the office or not, dealing with remote, how to do that, deeper engagement with clients, especially when remote, like how do we do that? Being more flexible, Janice, yeah, appreciate that. More engagement, direct engagement with your direct reports in a remote setting. Hey, Nate, how are you? Business line priorities, org structure, flexible working. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're hearing a lot of leaders who are dealing with the remote work or hybrid work and changing how they're building relationships and those types of things. But sometimes, what we're seeing also is leaders are just saying, we're going to keep operating the way that we are. We just need our people to do things differently. And that has some inherent flaws in it. Figuring out how to maintain culture in a remote world. Yeah, absolutely, Janice. Appreciate you sharing that. We'll take a couple more. Hiring, recruiting, and retaining candidates for sure. Training a new employee remotely. Yeah, that gets into the onboarding. Adrian, good to see you. That has been a challenge. Even though many organizations have had people that have worked in different locations, this is a bit different. We had our first all staff meeting, just earlier this week. And we had people who we had hired who had never met each other. And it was like, wow, my God, this is what it's actually like to meet you. There truly is, in many cases, nothing like face-to-face. So good. Keep the comments coming in. It's good to just get a level set of where you are. Thanks for sharing those things. And so where we're going to go from here, now that you've shared with us a bit about the biggest changes, we've level set what we want to accomplish today. I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and she's going to talk a bit about this data. Or the data, depending on what your preference is, about what's really going on in the workforce today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And as leaders within your respective organizations, it's so empowering to see either the change you just facilitated for your groups and text in the chat, or what you're about to shepherd them through. And if you're like us at Shift, you're also recognizing a huge sea change that's underfoot. Maybe, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, one of the greatest changes to hit our workforce. And that is part of today's topic, the Great Resignation. 4 million people exited the workforce in April 2021. So let that sink in. That's a pretty big number when it hit me. And to know that an additional 3.6 million left on the heels just in May suggests that this could possibly just be the beginning. Now, depending on the data source, you see it here, it varies widely, but 40%, according to Microsoft in a global workforce study, are considering leaving their jobs, 95% according to Monster, And over half would like to pursue the hobbies or upskilling that they took advantage of the past 20 months and make a run at a career for that. And of 13,000 knowledge workers in an Asana study, nearly 2/3 reported even higher levels of burnout. So something is at play in America's workforce. So again, 1 in 4 employees, you might think that this is not happening in your organization, and we just encourage you to stay vigilant because it still could happen. 1 in 4 employees plan to leave after the dog days of summer and they use up their PTO. And as many of you typed in the chat, hybrid work is upon us. So if folks feel forced to come back to the office, and a lot of our client organizations are targeting the September timeframe for that, when kids go back to school, it looks like some employees won't be. And the next 3 boxes give a little bit of insight into why. 25% of us forfeited time off in 2020. I think I was one of them. I figured I'm stuck at home. I can't go anywhere. I might as well just repurpose that time for work. It didn't feel like a vacation or an unplugging. 44% of folks, as a result, reported higher burnout than the previous year. And burnout is a health statistic that the World Health Organization added to their list of ailments. So it is a thing. And 57% of folks just really express that desire to truly untether and unplug from work. And all of us on today's call know how challenging that can be. So a stark quote, and a sad one rather, from a 23-year-old aquatic specialist at a national pet chain. In her $11 per hour job, again with the fish in the aquarium, she realized that this was not sustainable for a way of living. And instead, she left her job in April to pursue writing and more of the fine arts, something she was really passionate about. And this is just a backdrop of what's happening across the nation, which is really putting a spotlight on the retail worker, because we realize that a lot of their activities are replaced by AI or artificial intelligence, and they really have poor pay, inconsistent and pretty terrible hours, and it's not making enough living to sustain a lifestyle of any sort. So there's a big underswell underway to really take a look and examine retail jobs in particular. So why is this happening? We know from our own return to office survey results that folks kind of went through an existential crisis in the past 20 months. They were able to maintain high levels of productivity throughout client organizations and various industries. And they question, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? The grind, the hustle, maybe missing kids' milestones if I was a road warrior and traveled quite a bit. So people are really being selective about how they want to repurpose their next new age and work age of career. So the requirements of jobs have changed. Best-selling author Dan Pink also emphasizes autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And now that we as an employee set have had a taste of autonomy and can still perform strongly, the pendulum has swung kind of in our favor, that if we feel we're being forced back to an office or return to work as a place, we can easily go to the competition who might be offering better benefits, competitive pay, and maybe a more hybrid situation that's more flexible to us. So definitely the stakes have changed and the rules of the game have changed, and it's really in favor of the employees. There also seems to be, what we're observing, a disconnect between the senior levels of the organization and more junior employees. Some of our clients at Shift are multi-generational family businesses, and there's definitely a trend that there's a different vision in where work has to be performed, with older generations thinking it has to be in presence in the same location, where more junior employees are really the engine of the gig economy and have proven that they can work from anywhere. Couple that with the administrative tasks and requirements of where those have to be performed, and it sets up for the perfect storm, again, which is a conversation about where work can happen. So these are sobering statistics, and we want to warm up your fingers again and hear from you to say, what impact do you envision or have you experienced that this great resignation is having on your own organization? So go ahead and continue that text chat, and we want to hear from you how this is impacting you if you've seen this yet. Great question. So the question is the managers in the middle, and I call them fondly the thick middle, because mostly that's where a lot of your managerial population is, the frontline leaders, and they're in a quandary, to your point. So they're kind of trying to bridge, trying to not alienate employees, trying to retain the top talent, and satisfying and trying to swim upstream against maybe a legacy culture that may be in need in updating. So we've definitely done some work and some coaching with the mid-level layers of those organizations to that question. It's not entirely positive. We see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but there is some work resolved so we can have a flexible work arrangement. Tom wants to use this opportunity to find talent, which is great as long as you're willing to be competitive, because it is really the employees' options here. So how do you retain folks? Christina is looking for, folks are asking for higher salaries. There's also competitive benefits where folks are relocating, or different creative ways to retain and move talent. And Dave says he's lost some good talent to offers that you just couldn't match. Demanding flexibility. I see that thread through the next couple of chat threads. So that's great. And retention. All good things, Andrew. This will be a great discussion for the rest of the content we have today.
Yeah, it sets us up well to start, now that we've got the foundation laid to go into the 5 things. I will say, one piece around hybrid, seeing some of this in the chat, and it ties into a couple conversations we've had with clients and also some of the students who are in a class I'm teaching at a local university here, that when they're talking about hybrid, some leaders are relenting a bit, and they're going, okay, great, we'll do hybrid, we'll do flexible work. So, you can work from home like 1 day a week or 2 days a week. Okay, fine. And it's not necessarily a thought out strategy or a well thought out strategy. And what is winding up happening, or what people are reporting back to us, is sure, what the business leaders are saying is, sure, you can work from home a couple of days a week, but that means you're not actually going to have a space in the office. So when you come in, you're going to have to catch as catch can. There's no real, refined or architected way to make sure that people actually have space when they come into work. And so the feeling that gives, although it's not the intention necessarily, is I now feel like a second-class citizen of sorts, and I'm not important or valued by my boss. Or in some cases, what we're also hearing and seeing is, people are really worried. Employees, they're worried from if I'm not on site and everybody else is coming back to the office, do I lose influence? Do I lose my ability to be seen? Do I lose my ability to be heard? Will I lose my ability to get a promotion or a raise? And these are all the nuances and complexities of moving to a hybrid or fully remote environment that oftentimes we're seeing leaders haven't thought through yet. They're going, okay, cool, you want flexibility? We'll do that. But what about all these other things around how work gets done? So let's talk about what now. How will work actually get done? This leads us to the first of our 5 critical elements here. And we love alliteration, so they're coming to you in R's. Why not? Because we're talking about the great resignation. First thing is about reboot. We absolutely need to do a little bit of a reboot. And I talked earlier about this could be at the team level or the business unit level or the organizational level, but we do need a reboot. And it's got to start with first just understanding and acknowledging. I love this quote. It's one that I read and heard a long time ago. Our team has used this in many of the public sessions that we've done. The attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. So if you're just trying to duck the reality of people are going to leave, Joey Coleman, I saw your comment in there that many executive leaders are, they're seeing this, but they're thinking it's not going to happen to them, right? Oh, not my organization. We're not going to lose 25 or 40% of our people, right? Attempting to escape from the pain by either denying it, working around it, throwing a tactic or a Band-Aid at it, it's actually what creates more pain. And you will see that not dealing with the root issue of anything in your life, for that matter, is actually what causes more of the consternation, the distress, and the pain that you have. So the first encouragement we have here is, as we talk about reboot, is let's just deal with whatever the reality is. So how do you do that? It first starts with clarity and alignment. So we're giving you these 5 elements around clarity and alignment. There are others, but these are core ones. So first, it's probably time for a little bit of a reboot, or at least a refresh of your vision. And again, this could be your team vision. your business unit vision, or your organizational vision. It's time to maybe relook at the purpose of why your organization exists. For many companies, this has in fact changed through the pandemic. They're rethinking about and reinventing themselves. The second is values. Now it's time for a refresh, maybe a reboot of your organizational values. Re-looking at what is it that we value most. Aside from performance, we know we need performance at every level, individual, team, business unit, and organizational. But outside of that, what do we value most that we need to make sure people understand, embody, and bring to life every day so that when we see it, we can reinforce it? Too often, the mistake that we see clients make is they'll have organizational values that live on a piece of paper, or they show up on a website, or maybe they're even given out in a digital or an actual old school employee handbook. But leaders throughout the organization, they don't embody them. So when we talk about dealing with change well, or being inspirational, or operating with integrity, or openness, like, are those things exemplified? And so it's a real good practice to relook at these, and not only at the leadership level, but to involve the rest of your organization to help you do this refresh. Think about the goals and the strategies now. If we have refined or even confirmed our vision and our values, what are the new set of strategies and goals that are absolutely imperative? And what's critical here is that all leaders are on the same page with these goals and strategies. We were just leading a client offsite a few weeks ago, and it was 20 executive leaders from across the country from this Fortune 500 company. They had never had an executive retreat of any kind before, and they were plagued by, even before the pandemic, by things like, well, leaders aren't on the same page. This is what their thousands of employees across the organization were saying. Our leadership's not even on the same page. And so how can we be on the same page? We're confused. We don't understand. How is what we're doing connected to where we're trying to go, and where are we trying to go? And for leaders, sometimes they don't see that, right? This gets, Joey, back to your comment, right? Sometimes executive leaders have a different perspective, and it's because they have a different perspective. They don't see the same things that the frontline employees are seeing, and they don't realize the trickle effect and how confusing and oftentimes debilitating it can be to have a lack of clarity. And once you've got this vision, values, goals, and strategies, you've got to make visible scorecards or dashboards, or some way to make the progress visible. People want to know what I'm doing. How is it relating to our bigger picture? And are we in fact making progress? Are we winning? Your people and you, frankly, want nothing more than when you go home at the end of the day to know, like, I mattered today. My work mattered. It was worth it. It was worthy. And none of that can happen if we don't have this reboot and reestablishing the vision, the values, the goals, the strategies, and the scorecards. And then this last piece on here around initiatives and energy is so critical, gang. We can't reinforce this one enough. Jamie and I and our team, we see this all the time, which is clients say, these are the really important things. We've got to go take this hill. And then they spend money, time, and other resources on things not aligned to that. That sends ripples and shockwaves through the organization in terms of confusion. People don't know where we're going, why, or if what's being said by leaders is in fact actually true and matters. So that's the first R from a reboot standpoint. You've got to relook at least these 5 elements. It starts there. Before you do any other tactics, please get this reboot piece right.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes.
On that scorecard piece, do you guys see a difference between making the scorecards or those dashboards available to employees to go see the metrics or to go get that information versus pushing that out to them? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think this, you know me well enough to know that I probably answer your question like this, which is it all comes back to the desired culture that you have. So in some organizations, what they do is they'll push information out or make it available, either way, and that's where the conversation ends. And we know in high performing organizations, it's not that. It actually, the information that's on these scorecards or dashboards, however the information is made available, that it becomes part of a normal discussion in team meetings, in one-on-ones, in performance-based conversations. It's just like throwing values up on your intranet and going, done, we've got values. Like, that doesn't actually do anything. So I'm less tied to if you push it or if you ask, you pull people towards it. What's more important, Andy, is making sure that it becomes part of the regular dialogue. Like, ask your people, what did you see in the scorecard update this week? What really jumped out at you? Where are we winning? Where are we behind? How can you help us? make it part of the ongoing organic conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Got it. It's like we co-created this one together, Andy. That was like a perfect question at the perfect time. So all right. So now we've got to get to the second R, which is about rethinking. So once we've established like this, we've got this new clarity, then you've got to think about what are the roles in our organization that are most critical to power this strategy. Too often leaders miss this step, right? And they think about, well, the role is the role, or they just think about people and they go, oh, where can I put Jamie or where can I put Andrew? It's really a time to step back and rethink in order for us to execute this new strategy. Like go back to some of the quotes that you all put in the chat, and you told us about deepening client relationships, or that you need managers to do a better job of deepening employee relationships in a hybrid or remote environment. Does that change the nature of the work that needs to be done? And if so, does that change the roles that are actually needed to power the strategies? In some cases, the answer is going to be yes. And in some cases, no, but this is a critical step for leaders to think about. So here's a way that you can go about this. Number one, let's identify these critical roles, and our bias here for large organizations. Smaller organizations that have, under 100 or so employees, smaller organizations, you might not have as much critical mass, but the principles are the same. First, we got to think about how crucially important is the role to the company's capacity to execute the strategy. If you're putting your company's strategy at massive risk with this role not succeeding, that would be something that moves it up in criticality. And you also want to think about how much variance exists across your population. So if you've got, 2 or 10 or, 1,000 people in the role, you do want to look at the performance variance, because if there's a lot of variance, you're leaving a lot of impact, revenue, and profit on the table, very likely. We see this in some cases. We were talking with one of our clients, and they were looking at the VP and director level, and they said to us there was as much as a 30 to 50% variance in performance in one of the roles that was critical to powering their success. Holy moly, is that risky? That's significant variance. And so you want to look at these two pieces here to identify the most critical roles. Then you want to estimate the impact of decreasing the variance. If you were able to cut that variance by 5% or 10% or 20%, what impact would that have on your business? So that's a first thing that you want to think about. Now, how this plays true, so you can kind of get the concept and maybe put it into actual practicality in your environment. We have a client, we'll talk probably about this client's situation a couple times today, and they're in the publishing business. And specifically one of the parts of their business is like financial newsletters. They do an amazing job. They really top-notch in so many ways. But you might know, if you're familiar with this space, there's been a lot of regulatory and legal compliance related issues that have impacted this industry over the past few years. As such, their strategy at the macro level and the micro level has changed. And you got to imagine that one of the roles that's really important in a company that writes financial newsletters is the copywriter role, the people who are actually writing the copy. And so they needed to think about, what are the roles? This was a really important role for them. Well, when they did this kind of analysis, they reconfirmed that this role is still one of the most critical. And I'll take you through some of the other steps in a moment. And so they needed to, one, confirm this was still an important role. It is critical to their strategy. And in fact, they do have a lot of performance variance in this role across their business. Great. They identified it. They talked about the impact of decreasing the variance, which is material. I'll take you through the next steps in a moment of what they did next in evaluating that role and maybe even reclassifying or recasting it. But that's an example of a particular business situation, writing financial newsletters, thinking about the roles that are critical to powering it, like a copywriter, and going, okay, we really need to examine what excellence looks like here so that we can appropriately execute our strategy. So that's the second piece, the second R. So what we want to do again here is give you another opportunity to practice. Not just be on the bench, not just be listening, taking notes and, going, okay, conceptually, I get it. Go back into chat, and we want you to answer this question. Pick one of your most critical roles. So think about your business, think about your business's strategy, and think about one of the most critical roles. Pick one. And now think about what has fundamentally changed about that role or the way that work gets done in that role. And just type that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you here. So one of your most critical roles, what has fundamentally changed about that role, and how work gets done. This is a meaty one, so it might take you a couple seconds to type in your stuff. Less people in the office for support staff. Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing more or the same with less. Let's see, when we talk about sales discussions and coffee meetings, they're more so virtual than in person. So people coming into meetings instead of driving to the offices, that changes how connection happens. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. I'm going to try to soak up some of this. Directors need to be far more strategic and forward thinking, much less reactive. Yeah, that's in some cases, that's a very different DNA. Adrian, no support staff, senior management doing it all. So it's like, okay, did I just become an octopus overnight? How am I going to get all this done? Joey, well, let's see. While I appreciate the business reality of A positions, could we speak to the consideration or trend that one of the major issues with employee morale and defection is that non-A positions feel like they're categorized that way, and second-class citizen attitude may and often is contributing to resignations and defections. Yeah, absolutely, Joey. That's a real thing, man. Let's talk about that for a second. So part of what we see often is, the A players, if you will, they are sometimes rewarded by getting more work, and that is, oftentimes because there isn't truly a high performance culture. There aren't clear standards. There isn't great feedback. There isn't great training or support or expectation setting. And so you've got people who are, this is part of what Jamie and I study every day. You've got people who are mired in the muck of trying to figure it out, working really hard, but not succeeding. More work needs to get done. So the best people usually get more work. And sometimes that winds up even leaving them uninspired or demotivated, and they become a flight risk. But to your specific point here, what's critical is that leaders can provide clarity for the organization around the value that every role has to the organization, because every role has value, right? It doesn't matter if you are the proverbial janitor sweeping up the floors, if you're a support staff person, if you're in IT or tech, if you're front lines, if you're tasked with bringing in the business, or you're an executive leader. Every single role has value. And part of what we see is, there's misunderstanding or just a lack of understanding. People don't understand, and so they can't appreciate each other's perspectives and each other's roles. So one of the things that we really recommend and that we do with our clients often is just shine the light. Help people understand the work that happens up and down the food chain or across the value chain. That level of transparency and understanding, Joey, usually does a lot to fuse teams and bring them together. New levels of understanding and appreciation. It's not like, I'm selling something, gosh darn it, why can't my operations people ever do something right? And, because you're screwing up my clients, stuff that I sold. We got to do away with that divisiveness, and transparency can really help with that. So I hope that helps. I'm going to see maybe looks like maybe there were a couple more comments, and then we'll move back on. Project managers, Dave, for projects that are cross-product teams, who are all now working remotely. Yep, absolutely. So good. We appreciate you sharing all these things. The takeaway for us here is you're seeing some of the same things that we are, which is work is fundamentally changing. And so we need to be able to deal with that. So let's talk about, from a reflection standpoint, as work changes, how do we handle that? So work needs to be done differently. And there's a saying that we love, we didn't invent, which is you can't read the label of the jar when you're in it, right? You can't read the label of the jar when you're in it. And so we've got to look at things with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh perspective when we reflect on the work that needs to be done. So Jamie's going to talk us through an actual client example of how this came to be, what the situation was, and how this, from a practical standpoint, shows up.
Sure, Andrew, and I think it weaves through not only Joey's threads, but also Dave and Shelley, your comments about role clarity. So we had done a role excellence profile or a blueprint of what the best marketing consultants do in one of our clients, which is a global media, broadcast, and sports kind of networks. So in its simplest form, these folks are selling TV spots to their clients. And what we suspected when March of the pandemic hit and everyone scattered, we suspected two things. One, the nature of their job was going to change. So the role excellence profile that we just did might need some tweaking and some updating. So we already had our antennas up to see how this role evolved. We also felt, Andrew and I, so strongly, because we believe in top performers, that there are folks that will continue to crack the pandemic code. They will put up strong results because top performers always find a way. And we couldn't have been proven more accurately or more correct, because there was even a contest where they had 50 and 90. One of their VPs had challenged a region to put up 50% of their business within the first 90 days. So by March 31st, could they hit half of their book of business that they had booked the entire previous year? Quite a challenge when most of their small to medium businesses were either folding, closing their doors, and not up for business. So we interviewed these folks. We called it a job task analysis just to say, hey, how are you faring for the pandemic? And what are you doing to really stick the landing in the most challenging of times that you couldn't have predicted? And what we have here are 5 things that emerged that we'll share with you. And it's kind of the from what to what and the evolution of how they were able to crack the code. The first is sales folks, we know, and you can nod vertically and in support, tend to be very competitive, uber competitive. They don't share their trade secrets. They just motor, they're top performers, and they just have that competitive nature about them. What was a fundamental shift during the pandemic is that they were clamoring for and craving a platform to share better practices. They thought they could motor and migrate through and extend their reach for customers if they shared what they were doing without any pride of authorship. So let's open up the floodgates and create a platform for sharing pitch decks, email templates. There was more of a collaboration aspect than we saw way before the pandemic. And we suspect that that's not just unique to this client or this industry. The second is, these are sales as a business built on in-person relationships. So that when they were banned from sites or their customers had closed their doors, these folks obviously found ways to continue that rapport, not in person. So to the T, everyone I interviewed that was a top performer had handwritten thank you notes, celebrated either company milestones, helped with things that you wouldn't consider during the pandemic that were business related, but just helped listen, and with empathy, they were there for their top clients. And what this led to was each of them had evaluated their relatedness demand curve. And we can share some resources on that, but it's really, if they felt funny picking up the phone, asking how their client was faring for the pandemic, that was a signal to them that they hadn't built enough rapport before things were bad, that they had no basis and no grounds for a relationship. So they really analyzed subconsciously their business in that degree, and really made amends and just helped out with whatever the small to medium clients needed, and celebrated those milestones with gratitude and huge empathy. And I know that resonates with you, Joey, based upon your last kind of society meeting. The third is they used their managers very differently and not in a needy way. But top performers sometimes get neglected by management because they don't need too much. They're very autonomous. They're independently driven. They show great initiation. So sometimes there's a laissez-faire or a hands-off attitude, while managers might devote more coaching and time for folks that need performance change. So really what happened during the pandemic is, again, a golden thread was these top performers wanted to start either every day or at least the top of their week with 10 to 15 minutes of brainstorming and thought partnership for their managers. Now, when talking to the managers, this was a little bit of a shock to them and a little bit draining, but they realized the appreciation of how and when their top performers needed them, and those needs change. So as you work through your flex, a lot of folks put hybrid work as kind of the change that's about us now. Just consider ear to the ground how your top performers might need you a little bit differently, because we have to keep our pulse on those changing dynamics. The last two are not positive by any ways, but it's something that we should keep our arms around. The first is, and Shelley said this specifically in the chat, they're in-office sales support. So when the marketing consultants would sell these TV spots, there's a lot of paperwork that has to happen within the systems in order to get that on the air. And that's done by a lot of sales support. Well, when everyone's scattered from the offices, a few Marches ago, they lost that support. And those assistants or those folks that they could go to in the cubicle next door were now kind of sucked into special COVID projects, or they had to produce data, or they were on some kind of secret squirrel teams, and they weren't really supporting the marketing consultants, which led to burnout, fear, overwhelm, because they had to assume more of those responsibilities and they weren't doing the tasks really that they could do with consistent excellence. So a little bit of role clarity, and Shelley, you spoke to this, because if folks kind of dip down and do other roles, then you're not optimizing the system and how it's intended to produce your business results. And then the last is, there was an 8 to 6 work day. And because of that forfeiture of PTO, and because folks on average saved about 2 hours for commute time, they repurposed that for top performers did to work on the work of the clients. There's a little bit of a danger there. So whether you collect timesheets, whether you see people rolling over PTO hours, those should be flags for you as leaders in the organization, that sometimes we have to protect the top performers from themselves. They love the work so much, they're great at it. It feeds this kind of intrinsic motivation, and left unchecked, they could be in the percentages that I opened up the webinar with, that could be in danger and risk of burning out. So this was just one population and one client, but it is something we've seen kind of extrapolated across other clients. And we share that so that you can have your radars and antenna up, that when the other change is underfoot or people start to be dissatisfied, you can actually retain your top performers and prevent them from defecting to the organization or self-sabotage.
So part of this example that Jamie just walked you through, first of all, it's rather compelling. We believe that it's really relevant to everybody that's on the call, and we'll underscore a couple of other things for you to just take note of as we transition to the next slide. First is, you can write this down as you think, because so many of you talked about the manager and employee relationship. How do you want your employees to feel? That's the first thing to write down. How do you want your employees feeling in any given moment? After a meeting, day to day, about their relationship with you, about their worth and their contribution to the work, right? How do you want them feeling? What do you want them knowing? That's the second thing. And then what do you need them to do? So feeling, knowing, and doing. And if you start by just getting some of that stuff out of your head, and maybe even as a leadership team, you talk about this with some of your leadership colleagues, that can inform some of your from to, at least from the role of the manager. So how were your managers operating? How were they conducting one-on-ones? Were they? How were they having performance conversations? Were they even having them? In many organizations, the research that we've done says this. This is supported by research outside of our organization. At least 60% of employees and managers believe that one-on-ones are not useful and that performance reviews are a waste of time. Okay, well, it may not get easier in a remote or hybrid environment. If we suck at it face-to-face, how are we going to get better at it when we're not actually sitting in the same room? Right? These are things that you need to think about. How do you want your employees to feel in one-on-ones or about one-on-ones? How do you want them to feel coming into or after a performance review? What do you want them to know about the value that they contribute through one-on-ones or otherwise? And so this can help you, really rethink a bit about the role of the manager as it relates to connection with employees. Joey, saw your follow-up comment to Jamie around empathy being the secret sauce, in moving forward. We couldn't agree more. That connectedness, that relatedness, that understanding of each other is so critical. So really want to underscore that is one of the underpinnings here in this from to, as you think about the role of the manager. All right, continuing to motor then. So once we've done these first few steps, now we need to get to the re-envisioning, and we're going to help you understand how you can do this. So you've thought about the roles, you've rethought about the roles, you've thought about the value that needs to be contributed and how work gets done. So let's walk you through what we know works. This is some of the stuff that we do every day, Jamie and I. It's also in the book Thrive that she mentioned, which is our blueprint. It's our leader's guide for, to building a high performance culture. This is one of the, the backbones of the way that we think. Most leaders in most organizations operate on this top row. They work left to right. They think about training people, equipping people as a first order so they can do some stuff, so they can produce some stuff that hopefully will help us move our business forward. That really, I mean, we've worked with hundreds of companies. That is the way that most organizations work, left to right. We work right to left. I often lightheartedly say it's like reading Hebrew or Arabic maybe, or some other language, right? But let's start right to left, not left to right. Starting at the right means we've got to define success, and there's an opportunity for you all to re-envision what success looks like in these most critical roles. Once you've defined success at the organizational level and the team level and down to the individual level, then you can talk about what are the outputs of value. You see, what are those things that your people need to produce in their roles that will allow them to move us closer to organizational success. Then and only then do you want to do what Jamie described in terms of the job task analysis, shadowing people, really understanding specifically what they do every day or what they need to do. And then and only then should you determine what kind of training influences, coaching influences, or other resources are needed. Right to left, not left to right. So if you leave, writing only a handful of things down from today's session, one should be right to left thinking. Let's operate right to left, not left to right. So what the heck does that even mean? How does that translate? Well, this is how it translates. So I'm not speaking Martian language for you. Once you've picked those critical roles, these are some of the things that you can uncover by doing the kind of analysis that I just mentioned, working right to left. So Jamie and I and our team, we talk about and help our clients understand primary accomplishments, things that roles are responsible for producing. Jamie talks often about some of her experience working in life sciences and pharmaceuticals. And in one of the cases that she did some work, when their best people were studied and analyzed, what they discovered was that each of the top people, maybe 12 to 15 people, if I remember correctly, Jamie, out of the whole field force, they had very specific ways that they strategized and planned their territory. But this was taught nowhere in the organization's curriculum. Wasn't taught in onboarding. It wasn't coached in manager field rides. There was nothing that was visible to help people do this. It was an accomplishment that the best people worked on, that they just did intuitively and inherently because, as Jamie said, they were the best, and the best really just think differently. You've got to make those things visible. So we got to understand what are the primary accomplishments. It would be helpful as you analyze the new way that work is being done about how much time should a person who's performing well in their role be spending on producing each accomplishment so that people understand how to organize their day. One of the biggest challenges that people say to us, it's like the symptom, not the source. They say, can you help train our people on time management? We could, but it really isn't that they need help managing their time. It's they're not clear on their priorities and what value they need to deliver in their role. So through this exercise, if you can help people understand when they're performing well, relatively speaking, this is the amount of time they should be spending on tasks to produce these outcomes, that's really helpful. Then they can measure at the end of the day, am I winning, losing? Do I need more training? Do I need more coaching? Right? How important is this thing to this thing that I need to do? How hard is it? What might be some excellence indicators or leading indicators that would let me know I'm on the right path? Who should I be interacting with to produce this outcome, this accomplishment? What are some facilitators or barriers that might make it easier or harder for me? Specifically, what are the key actions that I need to do? And then there might be some open text comments. So these are all different factors, different elements of defining excellence in your critical roles. Jamie bubbled this up earlier by saying the phrase role excellence profile. That is an artifact, it's a tool, and it's a process that we use in our high performance work. If you're going to do this piece around re-envisioning, redefining excellence and having something that codifies it and defines it that can be then used as the visible standard of excellence against which performance is measured is of the utmost importance. And what's the point of doing all that? Well, it's represented by this slide here, really. When you think about the gray line, which is your normal distribution curve, in any organization, in any role, there is some kind of distribution curve, fairly normal. You got a few people who are amazing at what they do, a bunch of people who are pretty good and working really darn hard, and then you got your laggards who are just struggling and they maybe are in the wrong role, or they just don't want to do the work. When you do what we're describing here in terms of these R's and really getting performance right, what you see is a new standard of excellence. Your entire performance curve shifts to the right. That's the first part of value here, is an elevation of performance across the population. The second thing you should see here is the gap narrows. So that distance, that variance that I talked about earlier starts to shrink. And so you've got new standard of excellence, great, more people moving towards that, and a narrowing of the band, which brings massive value to your enterprise and frankly to your people that are in the role. They're happier, they perform better with less friction. And heck, what's the point of our conversation today? It's to help you avoid losing your best people. Operating this way will help you do that. We've got one more R to go. Are you ready for the last mile? I think so. All right, let's recalibrate. So what are we talking about here? The impediment to the action is the action, and what stands in our way becomes the way. In order for you to mobilize what we're talking about here and make this true for your organization, you've got to look at performance as a system, an organizational system, as opposed to a Band-Aid. A Band-Aid would be, well, let's just throw some more money at people and let's pay them more to hire them. There is a reality to that. We saw your comments earlier. Some of you are losing good people, new people in your existing people because other companies are paying more. That's a strategic decision that some of your competitors are making, paying more money. Paying more money with a system that's broken, though, isn't going to keep those people, right? So before you just throw more money at folks, we recommend a systematic and a systemic approach. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this graphic here. What we know, Jamie and I and our team, about high levels of performance is that there are interdependent influences here. And what we've got are 6 elements that really will either help you or hinder your ability to build a high performance culture. And a couple of things I'll point out. The first is if you divide this graphic at the horizontal line at the horizon level, dividing the top 3 from the bottom 3. The top 3 influences here that we're talking about, these are all external to the individual. Leaders, your ears got to perk up on this one. These are external to the individual. These are things that companies do to their employees most of the time. Their expectations and feedback. Are they clear? Are they regular? Are they useful? The environments, physically, mentally, emotionally. Do we have psychological safety in our organization? Do we lead with empathy and understanding? Are we listening effectively? Are we showing our people that we care? Through things like in one-on-ones, are you looking at your gizmos or are you fully present? That's an example of the kind of environment that shows caring or lack thereof. Systems, resources. Do our people have the right ones? Rewards, recognition, and consequences. Are those aligned with what we're saying is most important? Back to the first R, where we talked about the clarity and alignment, the vision, the values, the goals, the priorities. Are our rewards, recognitions, and consequences aligned to those things or not? Oftentimes we see there's a lack of alignment there. So those are external. The intrinsic ones, or the ones that the person brings to the job, are the bottom 3. Motivations and preferences, skills and knowledge, capacity and job fit. Let me make it real, more real for you. So back to that example that I talked about with the organization that's in the financial newsletter business. So when they looked at the copywriter role and they said, our strategy has changed. It used to be bring in as many new customers as possible, get as many names as we can, have them buy as many front end and back end promotions as they possibly could buy, and let's really drive top line revenue. That is a business model. It was one that served them very well for many years. But as the environment changed outside and inside, and their strategy changed, they moved from that, let's get as much as we can, to let's build more sustainable, long-term, really value-based relationships with our clients, long-term, more gradual growth revenue. That's a very fundamental difference in what's required in terms of doing the work. So you can imagine, if you look at some of these things here, just the motivations and preferences that somebody who is in a job to amass as much revenue as possible might be very different than somebody, if the role is, we're not looking for all the revenue gain, we're looking for slower growth. You might have people whose motivations and preferences are more oriented to one or the other. We got to check for that to make sure that the person is motivated to do what's required in the job. The capacity and job fit, or the skills and knowledge. You might have somebody who's oriented to working really fast paced, but now if they're working more slowly, more methodically, they've got to influence and negotiate and work more with legal and compliance. They might not be built for that, right? And so are they going to be frustrated? And are they going to feel like they're being shut down by other parts of the organization and they can't win? Are we setting the right expectations? Are we changing compensation plans in alignment with the new expectations? So as you're tinkering with your strategy, you've got to look at all these 6 influences. the next complicating factor, doesn't have to be, but usually is that there's not one person that owns all 6 of these. Right? So the person who's in charge of compensation might not be the person who is, managing the individuals and giving them feedback every day, or might not be doing the hiring, or might not be in charge of how the role actually changes. And so alignment at the leadership level, gang, is super, super critical so that we're not making decisions that we think are helpful, but in fact are harming the system. So you don't want to optimize. One of the things Jamie says to me all the time is you don't want to optimize one of the subsystems and sub-optimize the organizational system. That's really dangerous. Looks like there's a couple of comments in chat here. Let's see if there's anything we want to. All right, Jamie, looks like you're on it. All right, cool. So this is around the high performance system. And as you're recalibrating, you've got to look at these different factors. So as you're retooling your strategy, as you're re-envisioning roles, as you're thinking about what's really needed in terms of driving excellence, you've got to look at the organization as a system. And that truly is the role of the leader. If you asked us, Andrew and Jamie, what is the role of the leader in one sentence? What we would tell you is it's to create a barrier-free work environment. That is the purpose of the leader. That's why leaders exist. Create a barrier-free work environment or work system. And this model that we've got here on the screen, why we're giving it to you, is a little bit of transparency into how you can do that. All right, we're going to start to bring the plane in towards a slow descent. Not quite a landing yet, Jamie, but a slow descent. And so this quote taken right from our book, Thrive, we want you to let this one sit in. Right? Let it sink in a little bit. It used to be that good results, we would be high-fiving, fist bumping, and, going, cheering all the way to, to a dinner together. Good results anymore, they put you out of business, gang. It's too competitive. The world has changed. It's moving too fast. Good results put you out of business. Great results, not even enough anymore. They keep you in the middle of the pack. And I'm not just talking about top line and bottom line. Right? I'm not just talking about top line and bottom line. Organizations that truly thrive today and that will thrive in the future, these are the businesses and the leaders who can set new standards. I can't tell you how many times people ask us when we're doing our work, they say, well, how are we doing against other clients that you serve? And what will we benchmark ourselves against our industry competition all the time? My comment is, that's cool. And we can share that information and you can compare yourself against your industry peers all you want. And that's data and it's useful. But is that what you're really after? Are you really after trying to, meet the best in your industry? Is that the standard of excellence that you really think you're about? Or do you want to be the standard? Do you want to set the standards? Because frankly, you all know this, things are moving so fast. By the time you can even catch up to somebody that might be doing it better, they've already thought of 5 new things. And 3 new competitors have emerged into your industry, and they're probably going to eat your lunch. All right, so really think about what is it that you want from a standard of excellence standpoint. Next opportunity for you to give us some feedback. So we've been teaching you some of what we know. We've been sharing with you some of the pearls of wisdom, along with some very specific examples of how this work comes to life for us. Our belief is that you're going to get some things that are valuable that you can put into play. We also want to learn from you based on what you've heard today. So please go back into chat for a moment and just type to us, talk to us. What's one thing that you learned from our session today? Teach us. What really resonated with you? What can you put into play? What are you most excited about? Those are just some prompting questions. Give us a little bit of feedback about what really landed well with you that you will go use. Not just you can go use, but you will go use. So go back to your chat, type back to us, talk to us a little bit about the impact that today's session has had as we get ready to bring in for a close. Let's see. I need to answer the question, how do we want our people feeling, knowing, and doing? Lack of clarity and assignments equal higher burnout? Absolutely. Make the rank and file part of the process in defining greatness? Absolutely, have to. Different way of defining excellence versus just simply the outcomes. Appreciate that. Christina, thank you for the feedback here about some great ideas that you can put into play around supporting a director who's struggling. Yeah, Dave, the roles are changing. New expectations are key. You can't expect people to, to rise up to new expectations that are in your head only. We've got to make sure that those things are, are there overt and that people understand. I know there's more thoughts coming in, so we appreciate them. Keep them coming because that helps me and Jamie understand what we're doing that's working. All right, so here's how we're going to bring this into land. So the emphasis, where do we want to put the emphasis for you? On which syllables, as it were? Number one, take honest inventory. You got to know the truth, gang. That's first. Second, understand where the biggest barriers to engagement and performance exist in your organization. Do it without judgment and without rationalization. Just seek to understand, and then take purposeful and consistent action for improvement. So those are three things that we want to really emphasize in addition to what you said. Now, we've got more resources for you. One is, we mentioned Thrive. We've talked about it a couple times. We're really, really proud of the book. It's exceeded our expectations so far. Here's just some of the love that we've gotten from some really widely, recognized sources. You can pick it up on Amazon. Yay, it's a little bit of a commercial for the book, but that's not really the point. The point is we want to give you more resources. Other resources you have, we've written other books, Shift the Work and Grow Regardless of 2 hour books. We've got a podcast called Inevitable, The Future of Work, which is led by Jeff Lesher, one of our managing directors. And we've got a technology-enabled system that allows leaders to really connect and hear and empathize with their people. It's called Latch. We're happy to give you more information on that. The offer that we have for you, because today, while valuable, is just a start. We've not done this before. Usually we work one-to-one with clients. We're giving you a pretty cool and unique opportunity. Amy and I have crafted together a performance transformation program. Think of it as a performance challenge. It's 4 weeks, 1 hour per week. You get group sessions facilitated by me and Jamie. You get one-on-one support with me and Jamie, and you get toolkits and workbooks that will allow you to bring the concepts that we've talked about today to life. We're doing this 4-week program. You can enroll now in the chat. David has put the link here, so you can go register for a very short period of time. You're able to enroll at what we believe is a pretty crazy investment rate. It's $999. This would normally, if we were doing this with a client, we'd be probably close to $10,000 for a 4-week effort of doing something like this. So it's a pretty insane offer, but we're excited to share it with you. So grab the link. Go to the page. Space is limited. We're only going to take about 10 people for this first cohort to make sure that we can really give you the value that you need from this. So go and grab it. We would love more feedback from you. We appreciate you joining on. I think at the height, we had about 120 people register for today's conversation, which is pretty insane. And we're excited. So on behalf of me and Jamie and the entire Shift team, thanks for your investment in yourselves, in your team, in your organization, and in building a more engaged, higher performing culture. We'll hang on the line for a couple minutes if anybody wants to chat or has any questions. And otherwise, we'll see y'all soon.